How do you feel when you look back and see what's happening at home, and specifically Gaza?
Gaza is a small place. Physically, it's a small place. The entire area, it does not exceed 360 square kilometers. So when I hear in the news about people getting killed, getting wounded, there is a very high chance of me knowing them, knowing their families. So it's very personal. And the fact that I've left Palestine many years ago, it does not mean there was a disconnect between me and my people in Gaza.
When you look at what's happening in Israel and Palestine, some have termed it as a conflict, but some argue that it's not actually a conflict, it's occupation. How do you look at this occupation in terms of what people need to understand about the real issues happening in Israel and Palestine?
The term conflict is very dangerous. It's not really the matter of tasteless use of language, of vocabulary. It's very dangerous because it creates a moral equivalent. So in so many parts of the world, a lot of people who don't know enough about the situation in Palestine, the apartheid, the occupation, the colonialism, and the resistance, their answer to this is, why can't you just get along? Why can't you just stop fighting? As if really it's the matter of Gazans and West Bankers and Palestinians everywhere saying, you know what, we will stop fighting. But you can't afford to say that. You can't afford allowing colonialism to prevail. You can't say, you know what, apartheid is going to be the status quo and we accept that. So we have no other option but to resist, because resistance for us is a moral obligation as well. And that's why the term conflict is dangerous, and that's what we need people to understand. The moral, the obligation here, and the political and legal obligation is on the Israelis to respect international law. You have numerous United Nations resolutions that have passed by the General Assembly and the Security Council that says this is an occupation, this needs to end, Israel needs to respect international law. Not one single resolution tells Palestinians, don't resist, don't fight back. So this is the reality of it. CNN tells you something else, the Arab-Israeli conflict. What Arab-Israeli conflict? You see, so this is very essential to kind of reground our understanding of what's happening. And once we recognize that it is resistance to colonialism, a very active, brutal type of 19th century style colonialism, then people all over the world, including Kenya, will then understand, how do I locate myself morally within this situation? Where do I stand? I can't be a bystander anymore, because that's where the moral obligation becomes essential for everyone to make a choice.
As an author, you're also a journalist, and you've been in several media houses. Now, when covering any story touching on Palestine, it's a sensitive story. So perhaps you can tell us of the experience that you have when covering these stories touching on Palestine.
The style that I use, and I've used as an editor and as a media manager throughout the years, is to always find where the actual story lies. If you want to tell the story of Gaza, for example, look at how agencies tell the story of Gaza. It usually starts, the Israeli military said that a number of Palestinians tried to penetrate the border into Israel, and the Israeli snipers had to open fire and kill this number of them, right? So it gives the impression that Israel is always under attack. Israel is in a state of self-defense. Eventually, later on in the article, you will find a Palestinian point of view, right? So it's kind of this very guarded construction of how the story is always built. I don't believe in that. If you are telling a story in which there is an oppressed and an oppressor, a colonizer and a colonized, an occupier and an occupied, you definitely have to look at the story from the most disaffected, from the victim's point of view, not the Israeli military point of view. Fine, we will cite the Israeli military press release later on, but let's find the individual, the Muhammad or the George of Bethlehem and of Gaza, who have lost their homes, lost their son, or whose wife died trying to give birth at a checkpoint. That's where the story is. We have to look for the human dimension of the story in order for the story to cease being a mere cliche. Because at this point, this story has become so redundant that people became so desensitized to it. So we need to rediscover the story by looking at the human dimension of the most victimized characters in this story, and these are the Palestinian people. The term terrorism that is affiliated with Palestinians is something that Western media has pushed for such a long time. If we are terrorists because we are resisting, then you are indicting your ancestors in this country in their struggle and their resistance in the 50s and the 60s, because they fought the way we did, and they were called terrorists the way we are being called terrorists. So we have to be very, very careful.
Here in Kenya, we have now a symbolic embassy of Palestine, what we may call the Palestine Authority. What do you make of that move, as a country?
Right. So I think there's a distinction that has to be made here. I am very critical of the Palestinian Authority, and I do believe that there's a great deal of rampant corruption that resulted from the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. But I think there has to be a clear distinction between that and what does it mean that there is a Palestinian embassy in Kenya, symbolic nonetheless, or what does it mean that a large number of the international community, mostly from the South, recognize Palestine as a country. I think there is an important symbolic value and meaning in this, that all the pressure, all the arm twisting by the United States and Israel, all the manipulation of the media discourse, all the lies and all the deceit has not changed the nature of the support that we have always obtained from our brothers and sisters in this part of the world. So having a Palestinian embassy in Kenya is something I support 100%. My criticism of the Palestinian Authority aside, because the intention here is to recognize the achievements of the Palestinian people and the rights of the Palestinian people.